Warm greetings, everyone. Welcome to today's session of Monday Munching and Musing with Women for Water. This season is conducted with the support of Water Resources Council of the Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and in collaboration with W4W Foundation and media partner Counterview. My name is Mansi Bal Bhargav and I'm currently holding the position of National President of the Wiki Water Resource Council and I'm also the founder director of W4W Foundation. In this session today, we are here to listen and know more about a young water enthusiast, Manisha Shah Iyer. And before I invite her to have the conversation with me, I will just do a brief introduction of her journey in the water sector. Manisha Shah Iyer serves as a philanthropy partner for Asia at Synergios. If I am pronouncing it right, and Manisha has nearly a decade of experience in the private sector, philanthropic and non-profit organizations. Our work encompasses policy as well as practice with a strong focus on environment, climate action, and community-led natural resource management. She's worked extensively with government organizations, civil society actors, and grassroots institutions in India and Nepal. In her last role at Aragyam, she managed partnerships to co-create large-scale program designs that could enable local leaders and frontline workers with capacities and agencies to manage their natural resources with community participation locally. So we'll keep the introduction brief and so that we can move forward and do the conversation. To initiate the conversation, we also have Priyanka Kohar, council member from the South Asian Women in Water. And I hope, Priyanka, you are all set to take up the conversation and you are also briefly going to introduce yourself and take this conversation further with first question to Manisha. And over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. So my name is Priyanka and I have 7 years of work experience in the water sector. Currently, I just completed my master's in public policy from University of Erfurt, Germany. Uh, it's a great honor to be here and to be able to be part of this conversation. So, ma'am, I would like to ask you about your personal journey. How do you associate your career with water endeavors?
Thank you. First, I think I'm really pleased to be here. As I was sharing in Mansi, I've always been on the other side, the one asking questions and wanting to know more. It's really an honor that you've selected me for this conversation. I've been kind of I think water was kind of an intentional choice for me. After my master's, when I was exposed to being with communities and to be able to see intersectionalities that water has with almost everything, more so in rural context in India. It was an intentional choice that I made to move or work in the water sector. And I've been in the sector for almost a decade now to just figuring out what the problems are to then trying to work on the solutions and now trying to look at more systemic and sectoral challenges and how to solve. So it's been an important part of my life and my professional career to work on water.
Nice. And so, what are your current engagements? What are you doing currently?
So currently, I'm doing slightly something away from water, but which is a close connection with water. So I work as a philanthropy partner at Synergos. Synergos is a global organization, and we use the bridging leadership methodology to try and solve complex challenges, of course, like water and livelihood, which we see very closely intersected with our programs on shifting food systems or on agriculture. So I'm currently trying to look at the landscape of water philanthropies in India, how philanthropic foundations and private capital are playing a role in complementing the existing investments that government has and can support civil society innovations as well as market players. So I'm kind of looking at that and trying to see if we can bring philanthropic foundations to work together, one, to share knowledge, but maybe also at some extent to pool resources if it makes sense, where it makes sense, so that we're able to initiate more local action where government or market might not be able to. And I'm also looking at on the same lines of using blended finance as a way to support market actors to bring more investments from within, but also outside of India to support the entrepreneurial segment in India, which works on water.
So the target is rural or the urban India, or both, rural and urban both.
I mean, most of my work on water in the past, in my past roles, has been rural centric, but I've also been exposed to urban water issues from having interacted with experts in the space, having convened certain sessions around whether it's like urban water bodies or lakes restoration. But in this current role, I'm kind of, I'd say, agnostic to the context. I think water being a very local issue requires local solutions. So whether it's rural context or even within rural, it's very, very hard to generalize because there are intricacies of who the person is, whether their access issues, caste, the terrain they come from, livelihoods. So right now, it's for me, it's really agnostic. The idea is to have more people talk about water and not become really apathetic to water as something that is 3 degrees away from them, because it's not. So I'm really right now more of an advocate for the water sector in India.
So currently you are in philanthropy sector, and we all know the importance of investment in research or for operation. So how does a typical day at work look like for you?
Um, so I'd say I see myself as a node in a very, very large network, almost a global network. I support the Asia part of it. So most of my days is about, I'd say, interacting with other nodes in the network, and they could be philanthropists, they could be leaders who work for philanthropic foundations, or they could be change makers themselves. Particularly in water, I, along with one of my former colleagues, we started this series very similar to this, but we wanted to cover water entrepreneurs in India. We call them as waterpreneurs, and we've been interviewing them, trying to understand what is their business model and what is it that's restricting them from growing or to making a larger impact in water. Because more time I've spent in the sector, I mean, I've seen how government has been investing a large amount of money in water, although maybe it's dominated by one or two of these schemes. And then we've got civil society action, which often tends to be very localized, very, very in depth, but there's a challenge of scaling that and then making that work with government. That's where I've seen this niche for market players and entrepreneurs who have been really coming out in the last couple of years. We've seen so many successful water entrepreneurs trying to solve urban and rural water problems. So I've been also trying to see and meet them and document their stories and put it out there so that people are more aware of the challenges and struggles it means to become a water entrepreneur in India, and also how as an ecosystem we can support them to do better. So my typical days, I'd say a lot of interactions.
And what kind of difficulties do you face in your activities, in your task? And at the end of the day, do you enjoy them or do you find them rewarding in any way?
So I think when you're really seeking an impact through network effect, it becomes a little hard to tie your effort to an actual output or an outcome. You know that things are happening. There is a cascade of effects that certain conversations can create. But in my current role and having been in more, I'd say, hands-on role in the past, I do feel a little bit away from impact. And that's sometimes hard to keep yourself motivated to say that, no, my work and my effort are actually going to yield positive results. But I'd say that's kind of something that I experience on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, yes. And while doing so, how do you find the balance as a woman in your professional life and in your personal life?
Professional life, I'd say I've been very, very lucky. For some reason, ever since I've started working, or even before that, I've had always had very strong, like, women mentors and leaders around me who've guided, helped, answered questions, or just kind of made me feel like I'm a part of the solution making process. Even in my past role with our CEO at Argyam, she was a woman, and She was a very, very strong and influential person. So it's great to learn from her, but also my other colleagues that I've worked with. I think it's just been my good luck and fortune to have such amazing women around me. Even at home, like my mother is such a strong role model. She's always been one for me. She's a dedicated professional who has really built her career from scratch. And it's just been great to see her working with communities and taking ownership of the problem and then graduating from that to now working with the government to see how do you embed all the learnings that you have from academics to actual action. So yeah, I've always been inspired by women. In fact, in my last role at Argyam, since I used to work on advocacy as well, we did this podcast called Voices for Water. And the first season of that podcast was dedicated to women leaders in water. So it is a subject very close to my heart, and it wasn't very difficult for me to actually like kind of see how many women I know, because I mean I know most of like all the amazing women who've been in this space. But I think it's true for all women, no matter which sector you are in, that you have to balance a lot. You have to juggle a lot when it comes to personal and professional priorities. And for a subject like water, which requires you to be away in the field for large amounts of time, trying to spend that time with community. You have to make tough choices. But I think it's true for all women everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So you were talking about women leadership, that you have great women around you, in fact, in your own house, in your own home. So while we are celebrating women leadership, I'm sure what I feel is that there are not many women leaders, especially in the water sector, and most of them who exist are not much acknowledged across the fraternity. So, do you also feel that's the case, and why? Why is it so?
So maybe I would agree partially with that. I agree that there is lesser visibility to the work of women leaders in water, but I think there are several good and inspiring women leaders in the water space as well. But I think there are it's just a lot of things that stems from how things are socially, right? Like women, they tend to maybe shy away from taking up leading like conversations or taking up opportunities to go and speak about their work at some places, which kind of really pushes us in the background of doing things. But there are, I'd say, very, very inspiring leaders who head organizations who've started their own initiatives that work on water, or even in government. I've come across very inspiring women leaders, bureaucrats who work with the Ministry of Jal Shakti and other ministries. So I think it's not about really having a dearth of these women leaders, but probably spaces like this where they can come and talk about what they have kind of their journey has been and where they are now and support one another. But like I said, I've been lucky in that sense to always have that informal network of women who've supported me as I've grown in my career.
And if we talk about in terms of skill set, you feel there is lack of skill set in women in water sector, or in generally you feel there is lack of skill set in general terms, both the genders on ground.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the chance of working with grassroots leaders, like really women who've worked with their own communities on water. And there we have realized, like in my past roles, that there is definitely a skill gap. And oftentimes it's probably not so much technical skills, but as just soft skills of trying to be able to mobilize community, to be able to put your voice forward in a gram sabha when something is happening. And a part of that problem is solved by providing that mentorship and leadership building opportunity for them. But in more professional setups, like with nonprofit organizations or governments, I've not really found that there's a skill gap, whether it's amongst men or women, whether it's about technical know-how, the hydrogeology of water, or trying to figure out the science behind it, or it is professional skills such as training or planning or strategizing. I think we have quite a few amazing professionals in the space.
So the suggestions that you are providing for the skill sets are training strategies and the soft skills for the women.
Yes, at the grassroots, definitely, and even probably much smaller NGOs, maybe not the ones which are based in Delhi and Bangalore, but the organizations who are really based in like remote districts like Pithoragarh or in a northeast village. The grassroots organizations there, I think they require even skills like fundraising, which is increasingly becoming a challenge in our sector.
Yeah. So now, if we talk about the roles of the councils and associations, how do you see the role of these associations in building career and partnerships for women professionals?
I'd say they are very, very important. One is oftentimes, and even in my own experience, I've had this that when you're thinking about a shift in your career and looking for a new role, or when you're interviewing, more often than not, you will not find someone who gives you a candid feedback on how your interview was.
Yes.
But in my own journey, like I've met women who've interviewed me and at the end actually given me feedback saying maybe your resume could be better,
Mm.
or maybe you could have answered a question like this, or maybe focus on something else. And I feel that's where the value in having these associations and councils really come into being, where you have someone to really mentor you, support you, and have that judgment free kind of a space where you're just women trying to help out other women in the sector, and that counts for a lot. I mean, at a personal level, I've myself experienced that having someone who actually says this is what it is without the fear of judgment, I think that's what we need, and that's where a council can really play a role.
Yeah, and it helps us to find a mentor, and it is very much required, especially in this field when you are young and you are starting out. Or yeah,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
how do you see right now in your life that how can you see yourself to bring a change in this sector, like your own leadership?
So I think I've been thinking about that. So one, I feel like I really like writing. Whenever I have time, I would want to do that. So I've been thinking, how do I use writing intentionally to make more voices from the water sector visible and apparent to players who are on the other side. So that's definitely one of the things, I mean, one of the roles I see myself playing. And like I shared, I like part of, I feel like I'm one of the nodes in a very, very large network that's very dynamic. So it also makes sense for me to think of my role as someone who kind of keeps connecting people, keeps bringing people. I cannot control what happens after that, like what kind of conversations evolve, but to use my sound judgment to make a connection between A and B and C, wherever I feel like that's something that they could really do together. So having this, I'd say, vantage point of being able to see who are the different players and what kind of connections make sense for them.
Yeah, to be a bridge, basically. That's really important. It's also very much required. So it's really interesting conversation. And now Mansi ma'am will take over.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. And it was really nice hearing you for the first time, taking this conversation with someone whom you don't know, which is also important that, see, we are already trying to connect. And what Manisha, you were talking about, also makes sense that when you know that we are also doing these things. And I'm going to pick up a point from where you were talking about leadership and also that you were doing a work on connecting entrepreneurs and how things are in that. So tell me a little bit more about it when you talk about bringing entrepreneurs, knowing about them, running a podcast. And then, of course, you talked about connecting them through the node which you are mentioning. So I'm just trying to understand how was it designed and what was the way of operation, because you see we are also running this show. You are on the 76th session guest, but we have already touched nearly 90 people, because in some sessions we had more people, like Priyanka had got three people talking in one session. So we are also trying to connect water enthusiasts. So I'm quite surprised that we have not crossed our path so far, but today we have. So We have to thank Anubhuti Shekhar for that. But just help us understand, how did you work on that kind of initiative?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So when I was at Argyam has this portal called the India Water Portal, which is an
Yes,
open knowledge
yes,
platform on water.
yes.
So I had the opportunity of being a part of that portal and under figuring out, I'd say, the next leg in its journey as it evolves into a digital platform, right? It has always been
Mm,
digital to
mm,
become more accessible to
yes.
people who want to consume content in different formats. And that's where we kind of figured that podcasts would be a way to go because we've
Mm,
had a few podcasts dedicated to water, like there's one by Indian Express and there are a few
mm,
others.
mm,
But we felt that the conversations were probably not simple enough for
mm,
anyone, a lay reader or a lay listener on our platform to understand. So the idea there was to really bring experts from government, from market, as well as from non-profits to really simplify and break it down and tell people this is what's happening and this is the action you can take.
mm,
And
mm,
having
mm.
identified that gap, we started Voices for Water, and we did 2 seasons of that, where we had 5 episodes each. So we have like 10
Wow.
episodes.
Mm,
Really takes a listener through this journey of understanding what's happening with their water in the locations where they are at and how what is it that they can do to take
mm,
action.
mm,
So that was the idea
mm.
behind
Very good.
yeah.
Interesting. So I'm going to pick another part from where you're talking about leadership, and you also mentioned very interestingly that you had the privilege of working with women leaders. You know, your personal experience is definitely exemplary, and I will say it's rare because when I look at the data of women in the sector, it is also how we define leadership as well. That also matters. I am very clear in the fact with the fact that a good professional is not by default a good leader. You know, a leader has some additional qualities. So I would just like to understand from what you and Priyanka were talking about and build on it. What do you think some skill sets which let's say your generation looks up to on a leader, you know, or in a leader that they consider them as leaders. Of course, there's this organizational position which is already defining a leader as a leader, which we often relate a leader with that position. But there are also certain skill sets which makes a person or makes others feel that that person has a leadership quality. What, in your opinion, are those leadership qualities or skills?
Right. I think the first one that I'd rank is listening ability. And that's not
Mm,
just hearing, but when someone who's very different from you is talking, what are the different levels of listening you're able to
mm,
achieve with that?
mm,
So it's a very active, but also this kind of
mm,
reciprocal listening that would be the top
mm,
of the list on how to be a leader. I mean, how to be
mm,
an effective leader.
mm,
And several times, I think we all come across this. I have
mm,
myself had that with leaders that I've worked with, that they have a notion of their own, a solution of their own, and when someone who's much younger than them is coming to talk to them, it often is met with, "You don't know better than me," right? So
mm,
I think as leaders, we need to kind of shed that attitude because experience or ideas or the ability to figure out and think out of the box. I don't think it's not very linked to your age and experience. Um,
absolutely. You
um,
have just nailed it, to be honest, because it takes a while to be able to listen, and one has to learn to listen. So
yeah,
it's like, you know, learning to listen and then you listen to learn. It's a process. And because at W4W Foundation, we are running this show, as you know, you are our 298th session guest. So somehow we have to learn to listen first and then also, of course, listening to learn. But very well put. But there are some skill sets, just as I was saying, learning to listen, there are some skill sets which one can be nurtured if someone is identified or someone has that you know, inclination, or someone shows that some skills of leadership. What do you think? What kind of skill sets we can really nurture among young generation so that a person from my generation who took 20 years to be recognized as leader, in your case, it is 5 years or who knows, 2 years. So I'm sure there are some skill sets, and I know there are many leadership programs running around. So I am aware of it, but I would like to know what Manisha thinks. What kind of skill sets do you think can really help someone grow as a leader?
Yeah, and I'll speak more from, I think, my own
Of course, from
yeah,
your own
personal
perspective.
journey.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing I'd say is, as is like the skill to develop,
Mm,
is to be able to think clearly and figure out what is the process for you to be able to think something,
mm,
right?
mm,
Especially with younger people, one of the things that
mm,
happens is when we see a complex problem, when
mm,
the problem seems too complex, you want to give up very easily and very quickly, right? So as a leader, you need to be able to figure out what works for you. So even in
mm,
leadership, I think there is a context, and it's
mm.
what works for me might not work for some.
Absolutely. Mm.
So
Leaders
for
are born
me,
out of context or situations.
yeah. So for me, it gives me a lot of clarity when I'm able to write down things that's going on in my mind, and also be able to put some sort of like a schematic or a diagram around it to say this is how it works. But that's the way I think, right? So that would be one skill to build in yourself, is to identify what works for you, to help you
Mm,
think about complex challenges and help to
mm,
break them down. That's definitely the first one. um, I think second, and I don't know if it's a skill, but the ability to know where you're giving your time.
mm, mm,
That is something that's really going amiss with people from like my generation and even younger people, where we don't know where our time goes. And
mm,
I think it worked really well with leaders who have been in the space for a while, where you know that, you know, I want to spend two hours thinking about this, 3 hours thinking, because there were less distractions. And now we've got too much going on. There's a lot of information. So how do you pick and choose your ability, your time, in a way that it makes sense for you? So I
Very
think
well
that
put.
whether you want to
Mm,
call it time management, if that is the right word for it,
yeah.
yeah. But I think being the time, that's the second one.
Yeah.
And third is to, I think, and it's so much more important, water, is to be a collaborator or even a convener,
Mm,
because in case like water, which is like a common pool resource, it's very
mm,
hard to
mm,
build ownership. You can't find like one person who can solve it all. So how do you see yourself as a group of leaders rather than as
mm,
one leader who knows it all? That's
mm.
a very important skill set too.
Oh, interesting. I mean, you really put a very nice, skill, which is about collaboration. And you were already discussing with Priyanka about the role of associations and all. And I understand that Synergos is also kind of a network and a platform of many people coming together. Help me understand, because it's a global network, and Wiki Water Resource Council is very much a national kind of a network where we have actually managed to bring nearly 100 women on the platform and recognized, and we try to build this sisterhood concept amongst each other, help each other, mentor each other, collaborate, do things together. From your understanding, how youth can contribute to such networks and how youth can get something out of, so give and get kind of situation, because these networks are only useful when you make use of it and
Yeah.
when you contribute to it. What in your opinion youth can really do or appropriate with these kind of councils and networks? There are many. I'm this is one of the councils where I'm part of, but I'm also part of other networks. I'm sure it applies to many of you as well. What do you think you should be doing? Not you, as in the youth should be doing in this kind of situation.
So one thing that gets really streamlined when you are a part of the network is, I'd say, the flow of information, or
Mm-hmm.
being able to see what is important, right? Because most of the
Mm-hmm.
networks are created either with a purpose or they
Yes.
are working towards something which there's a common end goal to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you associate yourself with the network, or the ability that networks have is to be able to bring people together on common issues. So I think even with youth, um, there are such networks and platforms which help you find who else is interested in what you are, and who else can help you overcome the challenge that you're facing right now. So, for instance, there is a network called the Climate Party. I mean, I just happened to go to one of their events and I joined that. And it's mostly young people who work in different aspects of climate change in India, and trying to figure out who is the person who can help them with the next set, right? So I think being in network really helps you when you're lost, when you don't know whom to ask for something. And we have all these networks are on WhatsApp now, right? So you have a WhatsApp group, or you have a place where you can actually go and ask questions. So I think for young people, one is to give a little bit of your time in helping others in the network. And second is understand what role um, can you play, and also what you can seek from others in the network, so that it is a
Yes.
valuable association, right? It's not supposed to be about, not like a social media thing where you're going and saying things and um, reactions and waiting for people to comment on it, but make it more
Yeah.
purposeful and
Yes.
become clear why you're a part of a network like that. I think the purpose behind networking should be very, very clear for them.
Wonderful. So that brings me to more questions about youth, and also to closer to the session. Uh, Water sector is kind of a niche sector, even though that water should be discussed across the sectors, but we talk about specific water sectors or centers, or uh, what do you think youth should be really considering joining the water sector, and why are not many youth joining water sector? So what will be your message for the younger generation, that here is a good sector, or here is a sector which everybody must join, or what is your that you would like to say to the younger people?
Uh, it is a very difficult space. So I think we have to be honest with what it is, right? So if you're looking for a place to learn and really have your work being tied to lives of people, I think water is important to life, the way I've kind of always thought about before I joined the sector. I think if you can associate yourself with making that change happen, it is a space for you. But you have to be ready that it is incredibly hard, because you have to learn a lot, and it takes several years before you can become comfortable with the science behind water, the politics behind water, the civil society movements, the history, and now with climate resilience and how water fits into that. I think if you are, you have to be a little patient, and you have to have that, you have to be able to spend that time in understanding the complexities of it. So have patience, join the sector. But even then, I think now we've got so more information available on different parts of the sector. So now joining the sector doesn't have to mean that you have to join as a junior professional in a nonprofit organization. You can, if you have a great idea, you can choose to incubate that and build a startup water, right? If you are an
Yeah.
engineer or solid technology, think about how AI can support the role in water. And you can also think about doing things, I'd say part-time. It doesn't have to be like completely, you have to give yourself 100% to the sector, because I feel like it's such a long haul. And if you're not sure about it, maybe you can start small, think about the intersections and work in them. But if you're really passionate, you should join it, because there are fewer people who feel that way. And if you don't have water at your home for a day, you know what the pain is like. So you can imagine the 500 million people who do not have access to water in India, and the
Yes.
number continues to grow. And it's also
Yes.
not a national issue, it's an issue everywhere in the world now. So I'd
Yeah.
encourage, with a little passion, give your time and figure
Yes.
out what you want to start and how do you want to do
May,
it.
yeah, maybe with a bit of line of warning that may not be one of the highest paid profession, but it is highly satisfying profession for in that sense. My last question to you is because on engendering, because we are talking about women in water and women for water. So by the woman, for the woman, of the woman session, I'm just curious to understand from you what little things, because this is the water sector is still predominantly male dominated, like other sectors, including our politics in India as well, where we really lack women having background or sensitiveness, or even male who are sensitive towards environment and water sector so that they can be taken care of. But what little things we should do at workplace, at educational environment, which can really help more women join the sector, or which can make working in the water sector more gender friendly or gender inclusive, this which is what I call as engendering the water sector. What should everyone do? It's not about what women should do,
Yeah.
because I think we have gone past this whole narrative of empowering women, because that's now an old story. But what everyone should keep in mind, even male, other genders, seniors, juniors, for ensuring that the sector is engendered, because after all, water itself should not be tagged into this gender or that gender, and especially in a society where women are more custodians of the water, and then
Yeah.
decisions are taken more by men. So there is already a problem. So what is your suggestion, so that slowly we can move to a space where we only talk about water problems and not talk about women in water? We want to reach that stage, where we are all human beings and working on in the water sector.
Yeah, and I think when I reflect on that question, a lot of things come to my mind. I think so if you really look at very, very grassroots and you're looking at women leaders who work with community there, I think having a mandate saying that
Yes.
you are a water champion of this village, this is your know-how and this is your power. I think that really helps to define it and make it very clear at that level. But when you come to, I'd say, organizations or nonprofits or even in government, um, I'd say it would really help to have like guides or mentors for women who can help them see this is how you grow. Because apart from working for water, you're also working professionals. So you need to
Yes.
be able to see where you're getting and how your growth would be, and to not have women or anyone for that matter be stuck in the same position trying to, that kind of really takes away all the passion you have.
Mm.
When you get really stuck in one role or you're not able to see what is next. So I think the power of networks and councils like this, and going back to the question, is to be able to support people by giving them a variety of exposures, or being conversations like this, to be able to
Mm.
say, okay, here, these are the different options that are for you, out there for you, and you can figure out how do you want to get from this point to that, if that interests you. But to be able to really show that to them, I think that's important, because not everyone wants to just grow through the ladder, get promoted, and one day become
Mm.
like a CEO of an organization, something like that, right? So what are the different arms and legs that the sector has, and how can people fit into this, like young people and mostly women more so, fit into those roles without really having that shred of self-doubt, whether or not they'd be able to do it. So I think that someone to motivate, someone to listen to them. Um, and I think the last thing is having autonomy. I think women should get more freedom to make decisions in the workspace, and that's more in the water sector, because a lot of decisions tend to be also intuitive. And I think women have very, very strong intuition, and they're able to make correct judgment, even sometimes when you feel like the data is not giving you the right picture. And in water, the data is, as we know, it's not great. So I think that's where women leaders can really move the needle when they need to. But they should have that freedom and autonomy to be able to make those decisions. So I think we should have more of such places and opportunities for women in the sector.
Wonderful. I think that brings an end to our interaction with you as in terms of questions. But if you have any questions for me or for Priyanka, or in general for women in the water sector, This is a good time to ask, otherwise we can call it off and do the formal vote of thanks.
Yeah, maybe just one question. So, how, like, what is the role that you are playing with supporting like young women leaders in the sector? Is there like a goal that you're driving everyone towards when it comes to like leadership and women leadership in the sector?
Okay, one very good question actually. The official role, I told you in the beginning already, and this is when we conceptualize this whole series. But having gone through my own life journey for nearly 3 decades, I think we know the gap in mentorship, and I personally think that I wish I was mentored at some point in time. So I'm engaging in something where where I feel that I should have been getting that advantage. So having said that, at personal level, that is the reason. But at the Wiki Water Resource Council, we definitely want to know how women are maneuvering their life journey, and especially what kind of water endeavors they are into, because if they have become water council members of Wiki, it is also important to know what they do, how they do, so that if required we can also connect people. So I see my personal role is of connecting people, but the role of the council is also creating these opportunities for collaboration, making an environment where people get to know each other and also get to appreciate each other's work. I mean, we don't have to be all the time in competition, and especially in water sector you need more collaboration than competition. I think that is I will say a sense in nutshell. And personally, I'm very fond of learning about people's journey. So, in short, biographies. So, I think through these conversations, I'm also getting to learn about so many people, and also it allows me to reflect upon my own life. 30 years in the water sector, and still trying to learn an ounce about water, and also now a little bit more about the people who have charted their path in the water sector. And it has been extremely rewarding, I must say, to have these conversations. I mean, nearly 76 conversations, but nearly 90 women have been, discussing with us. And we had a few male members invited to discuss about role of women in the water sector. We want to do it more in the future sessions. But I think it is extremely important that their contribution is acknowledged and appreciated. And this is only possible when we have more documentation and dissemination of their efforts. What I learned from my own research in the past in both water and built environment, where I'm running both these series, is that women's work have not been enough documented and disseminated, and probably one of the reasons why people do not know about exemplary works carried out by women. And that is why I think it is extremely important that we at least have a space to let them open up. What do they think about life? So I mean, in our session here in Monday Munching and Musing with Women for Water, we are really not talking about water per se, but we are wanting to know more about the woman who has been in the water sector, and that's why we call it blue lips. And I mean, it's more to I think that it's more geared towards understanding, or I will say learning and sharing the worries and the wisdom by the woman, for the woman, of the woman in the water sector. And what we have tried to do in this regular discipline manner is create a master class of like a situation. And then we have this repository. Otherwise, if we were just doing it for the sake of, 1 or 2 sessions, I would not have really learned enough, and the team would not have known so many women. So it's also learning about who is doing what at which part of the country. So people also meet now, people also collaborate, people are also seeking help. I'm doing this project, I'm writing this proposal, is there anyone interested? And I find it extremely I will say rewarding when people are connecting. And when people ask me what is my motive behind it, I simply say, if you know mala, the beads are all of you as professionals, and I see a role of a leader is like the thread, the dhaga, who is able to bring people together and put them to keep them together, and yet the role is invisible. But then one has to ask question, what is more important, dhaga or the moti? And I think that is where personally I have been extremely contented with this kind of conversations, and also talking to most of the Wiki Water Resource Council women. On an average, I really get to talk to at least one or two women on a daily basis. So for last 3 years, so nearly 3 years, just about to complete 3 years in December. So that way, I also got to know so many people. And 90% of the women I did not know before joining the council. So we are learning, we are growing with each other, and I think that's quite satisfying. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you
We
so
want to,
much, Mansi.
yeah, we want to touch nearly 100 conversations, and of course, we are also writing it up so that we can come up with a small booklet and share it with more people, so that people know that these women are walking and talking about water. But thank you so much, Manisha Shah, for this enlightening interaction. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. For me, it was just like flowing like water. And also, thank you, Priyanka Kuhar, for taking this lead for today's conversation. I also hope, because you enjoyed, because it was your first time, may
Yeah,
you both become an inspiration in the times to come. And we are grateful to have learned your journey, which you have started, I must say. It's a long way ahead, but hope you continue with your water activities and do keep us posted. And I do hope that you join the Wiki Water Resource Council. At Monday Munching and Musing with Women for Water, we shall continue at 5 p.m. IST every day, and look forward to learning more and more from other women from the water sectors. You may please follow the social media platform and the YouTube link for Water Resource Council, as well as the Monday Munching and Musing with Women for Water. For now, thank you so much, all of you. please take care, and thanks a lot once again, Manisha. And I
thank
hope
you.
we stay in touch. Thank you so much.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.